Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar brought to you by sharedserviceslink.com and sponsored by Readsoft. We're looking at a really interesting area which is very, very pertinent to shared services leaders and accounts payable heads right now in shared services organizations, which is about increasing productivity within the accounts payable team and the accounts payable organization. So really pleased that we have the Time Warner Cable's Accounts Payable Shared Services story, where we're going to be looking in particular at processing 40% more invoices without increasing staff. So let's have a look at our speaker panel for today. My name is Susie West. I'm the founder and CEO at sharedserviceslink.com, and I'm very pleased that I am presenting to you as your experts and your speaker panel, Steve Benyon, Director of SAP and Oracle Sales at Readsoft, and Larry Wilson, Senior Shared Services Center Manager at Time Warner Cable. So do make sure you've committed a good hour to this webinar, and I'm sure you've signed up to it and committed to it for a reason, so make sure you think about the questions you want answered and just see that they are answered. If you feel at any point throughout the course of the hour that they're not, or if anything in particular triggers other questions, just put those questions to me and I will put them to our experts in the last 10 minutes of this webinar. And make sure you do stick around for those last 10 minutes. They really are very, very insightful. It's a very simple technology. You just need to put your question in the panel, which is marked by the red box. That comes through to me, and I ask your question on your behalf. So do take me up on that offer. Let's have a look at the context before we get into the story. So we have a lot of shared services organizations dialing into this webinar today. It's proven to be exceptionally popular, and the reason for that is because there's increasing pressure on shared services organizations to increase a very, or improve a very key chief KPI, which is the one around productivity. More and more shared services organizations are using this as a barometer as to how they are performing. Normally, if you ask a shared services director and accounts payable head, productivity around numbers of invoices processed per FTE will be in the top 5 as an indicator to the health or of the health of the accounts payable organization. So it's not surprising that this is a very popular webinar today. So the pressure to do more with less continues in the world of shared services. Many of us either have been going through or are going through the journey where the key milestones are the consolidation, centralization, standardization of finance, the financial transaction world. And obviously this delivers huge benefit. But from a productivity perspective, some might say that the performance ceiling is really blown away into a completely different stratosphere when you start really focusing on driving out the exceptions. So you're into the high 90s as far as first-time match rates are concerned, and you're in a very, very good position to be introducing and optimizing automation technologies like the one we are looking at today. So before I hand over to our first presenter, let's just start with a quick poll, just to find out where you are on your shared services journey. So coming up on your screen now, ladies and gentlemen, please participate. We look to have about 70% response rate to these poll questions. We do share the information, so it's great for benchmarking. Where are you in your shared services journey? Just one box will apply to you, so just tick the one box, please. Are you evaluating shared services? Are you in the design and setup of shared services? Are you in the stabilization, post-go live, and the standardization of your shared services organizations? Or are you in the more maturing stage of shared services where it's a real focus on continuous improvement? We have 69% of you voted. If you haven't voted, let's see if we can get past that 70% barrier. If you haven't voted, please do so. Closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look at the results. Thank you very much. We were at 75% participation there, so that's very positive indeed. So coming up on your screen now, you can see the results. Interesting. 18% of you are at other stage, but we have 28% at the beginning of the journey, and 28% very much in the maturing shared services and continuous improvement. So interesting results there. And with those results, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Steve Bennion from Resoft. Over to you, please, Steve.
Thank you, Susie, and welcome everybody to the presentation. Very interesting results from our survey. I'd like to just talk for a moment about the agenda as we move forward. The first thing we'd like to do is really identify what the goals and objectives of shared services and in accounts payable are, and what some of those challenges are for an accounts payable shared services center in reaching those objectives. Then we're really pleased to have Larry with us today to share his experience at Time Warner Cable and the project that they put in place to drive more efficiency in their organization. And then we'll finish up by reviewing some of the things to consider when you are evaluating and rolling out your shared service center. And then lastly, we'll finish up with some questions. So let's just start off by asking, what is the goal of a shared services center? Well, we've identified basically three principal objectives. First one is, obviously, reduce costs. Well, that seems like an obvious answer, but let's define a little bit what we mean by reducing costs. So really there's three areas that I look at when I look at reducing costs in processing invoices. One is, what is the overall cost per invoice? And of course, this will vary somewhat depending on how you measure that. The second is to be sure that invoices are paid on time. And the third, to measure, and I think this is a real good measurement, is to measure how many invoices per person can in fact be processed. So as we look at this, we see cost per invoices anywhere from best-in-class companies that are a little over $3, slow adopters as high as $39, and the industry average being somewhere around $15. So pretty wide range there. Invoices paid on time. Our real goal is to get up around 95%. And invoices processed per person, also pretty wide range. We see in a non-automated environment as low as 20, 25, 28 invoices a day, up to over 600 invoices a day. And of course, you know, why is this range so wide? Well, in some cases, to some degree, there is a factor of the composition of the specific invoices and the nature of how you do business. But more importantly, the part we have some control over is the degree to which we can automate this particular environment. So really our first goal is to reduce cost. So our second goal is to make sure that we are paying accurately and that we're paying on time. So we, to pay accurately, are going to want to have our validation checks in place. You know, the obvious things are to do matching against POs and goods receipts, for non-purchase order or general expense invoices, we'll have those approvals in place. And so we want to make sure that these are accurate and that we are good stewards of of our company resources. We don't want to pay too early because then we miss our use of cash. We don't want to pay too late because we might incur costs, frankly, that just aren't necessary. Late penalties, missed discounts, and there's a lot of hidden costs too. We wind up, if we have a poor credit rating, then that will have an impact on us. We maybe not have the negotiating power with our vendors that we would have if our service level agreements are not high enough or that we happen to be missing them. Thirdly, another goal of shared services is really to comply with, and every shared services facility is really expected to comply with regulatory requirements such as Sarbanes-Oxley and other internal controls that you might have. I think if you think of some of the key drivers of a shared service project, an obvious one is that you want to consolidate those financial activities that are out there redundantly being used in multiple departments in your organization. Roll those together, consolidate those, and that really can help you control and improve the control that you have. TPI and Information Services Group suggest some of the specific benefits that I'd like to just recount with you. Processes in a consolidated environment are inherently easier to monitor. And if we can monitor those processes across the entire organization in the same way with the same benchmarks, they're easier to manage. Since we standardize those procedures and those controls, it's really much easier to detect variation when people depart from the standard. And it, as a result of that, makes fraud much more difficult to take place. So it's really, as we bring all of these resources into a shared services and these activities into a shared services environment, it's easier for us to segregate the duties and really to leverage the generally accepted accounting practices that will reduce errors or reduce fraud. And I think lastly, the thing that's really a part of this whole goal is that we improve our customer service environment, which I believe really was was one of the drivers for Time Warner, and I think Larry will talk to us a little bit more about that. So Susie, before we go into the goal of accounts payable, did you have another poll question?
I certainly did. Thank you very much, Steve. So coming up on your screen now, that's certainly pertaining to one of the areas within the goal set that Steve was talking about just now. How many days does it take your organization to process an invoice so it's ready for payment? So if we can get the average cycle time, please, of all your invoice types, how many days does it take your organization, on average, to process an invoice so it's ready for payment? 1 to 6 days, 7 to 13 days, 14 to 24 days, or 25 days or more. So if you can respond, just tick the one box which represents your average. We're at 66% of you voting. If you haven't already done so, please vote. I will be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look. We're at 71% of you responding, so thank you for that. Coming up on your screen now are the results. So we have only the minority of you, 13%, coming in at 25 days or more, so that's positive. And 62% of you coming in with payment, invoices ready for payment within 2 weeks, just under 2 weeks. So interesting results. Back to you, please, Steve.
All right, thank you very much. And I'm actually surprised by these numbers. I think that you guys are doing a good job. It really shows, I think, that a lot of companies have entered this automation environment and are leveraging some of these techniques to be able to reduce the amount of time it takes from the time we receive an invoice till the time it actually is ready to be posted in your ERP system. So now let's look at the goals of accounts payable. And quite honestly, does this look familiar to you? You know, with the exception of consolidation of activities and a more standardized process throughout the organization, I think the goals of accounts payable are very, very similar to the goals and largely the same as those in the shared services center. So thinking about the goal of accounts payable from a more strategic perspective, we want to really safeguard the cash of our organization and prevent any unauthorized use of or misappropriation of that cash. So moving forward, let's just talk for a moment about the top pain points for the accounts payable processes. The goals that we've been talking about so far are not easy to achieve, and so we find this to be true especially in a manual environment. So looking at this slide, the top pain points for accounts payable processes, if we look at and study this slide, we can see jumping out at us 2 or 3 very specific ones, and we think about the process itself of receiving an invoice. Look here, majority of invoices received in a paper format. This is a very large bottleneck in the AP or shared services environment. Manual data entry and inefficient processes, high number of discrepancies and exceptions. So we find a lot of times that these activities, which really about 80% of the, or I should say about 20% of the invoices are occupying about 80% of the time of an organization. So we have some real focus areas that we can work on to achieve this. So figuring out ways to take this paper, put it in a digital format, be able to roll this, auto-populate your ERP systems in an efficient way, and to automate the ability to resolve discrepancies and exceptions and do more automated approvals. These are really key focus areas for getting into that top quartile of performance. So let's take a few minutes now and listen to Larry. I'm very interested to hear his experiences at Time Warner Cable. So Larry, thank you for joining us, and I'll hand this over to you for now.
Thank you, Steve. Welcome, everyone. I wanted to show you a couple factoids about Time Warner Cable. We are the second largest cable company in the U.S. And somewhat of the subject of the call today is what happened around our experience when we acquired Adelphia along with Comcast in 2006. We did go public in 2007, and we are totally independent from Time Warner since 2009. So I came on board in about 2003, and here's a little bit about what the situation I walked into. At that time, we had about 27 major divisions, and they each had their own AP processing. If you think about how cable companies came together, most of them bought up other smaller cable companies within their footprints, and each of those naturally would have their own processes when they were independent. So the decision was to consolidate AP into one shared service center here in Charlotte, North Carolina. But we just didn't introduce the shared service environment as a way to kind of absorb people in. We decided to do kind of a Big Bang theory. We kind of had the calamity before it actually became a sitcom, because we not only were consolidating this into one center, we also were introducing a totally new ERP system, PeopleSoft, and we went to a web-based automated approval workflow on the back side. So it's totally different all the way around from where people were processing on paper in their local offices to now they were moving that to the shared service center, and it's all then getting it back in image format to approve and do coding and etc. So it was a big shift. And one of the interesting things about it was, though it had C-level support, we really didn't have that C-level champion out there beating the drum for us, and it was also not necessarily a mandated process. We had to go out to these divisions and basically sell them on the advantages, and that was very tough. But it was also a great challenge, and I kind of appreciated that. So maybe if I knew all that before I actually came on board, I may have had a different decision or asked for more money. I'm not sure. So then we moved into 2004. This was 2003, and then we went to 2004. So what were the goals now? So we got this whole new processing. So basically, obviously, it was to produce faster, more invoices, eliminate keystrokes, reduce headcount, still serve our constituency in the best way possible. And also, how's the best way to go about that? Our makeup of our vendor base is a lot of utilities, a lot of smaller mom and pop contractors and things in the local areas. So really, some of the tools that were available in 2004 didn't make a lot of sense for us, but OC automation did. And so then that's when we went out and started to really look at who we should partner with. And that partner turned out to be ReadSoft. But one of the biggest things that we found that would be obtained by going to OCR would be the early identification and visibility of invoices. Even, you know they're in your system, you know you have them. You're not out calling 27 different places looking for invoices. They're all coming here, they're all getting scanned immediately, becoming image digitized, so you know where they're at. And that also helped very to highly increase our discount rates. We figured that the divisions doing themselves was probably averaging about 87% of earned discounts. Within our first couple years, we blew that away and went up to 96, and that has pretty much climbed to 98, 99%, and we've been pretty steady about that for the last 6 years or better. So that in itself, if you think of those dollars, really almost paid for the shared service center project in itself. So now the other thing we knew in 2004, and the reason we went out to look and get ReadSoft, was we knew that we had a purchase on the horizon of Adelphia. So 2005 came, and it kept getting delayed, but what that did, it gave us a great opportunity to really perfect the processes, have the people actually creating the vouchers, had time to work with the new products, and we learned how to streamline and do things as best we could. So then it finally did come to fruition in 2006. We did actually even do an invoice upgrade at that point. So we were ready for Adelphia. And that was probably the sweetest thing, was the fact that we were able to bring Adelphia in, which was, we went from 1 million invoices up to 1.4 million invoices that year. But we were able to eliminate 30 to 40 AP staff that they had at Adelphia. And also, when we swapped systems with our competitor there, Comcast, we were actually able to eliminate an AP department in Dallas that they had. And here in shared services, we basically really did not do much of any. We added a few heads, but they weren't necessarily in the AP processing area. And the ReadSoft, we brought them all in a few months. We were up and running, and it was kind of a very beautiful thing. To kind of give you some numbers, before we actually put ReadSoft in, We had lots of temps. We had lots of overtime. And our benchmark was about 80 invoices a day per person. Right after we put ReadSoft in, our benchmark jumped to 120 per person. We eliminated the temps and reduced almost all of the overtime. And currently today, our benchmark's at 180, but our staff is doing much more than that. The highest person in October, for example, did 285 per day average. So we got about half the staff we had in 2006, and overtime is really very minimal, if anything at all. So we finally got Adelphi in. So then what happened in 2007? Well, 2007, the goals were now to, again, streamline that volume. We had a whole new set of utility vendors. We needed to try to consolidate them. We needed to increase our P-card spend. A lot of their locations were not using P-cards. And we needed to, again, improve our rate of moving invoices straight into PeopleSoft without being touched. So 2007, we were able to have some fairly significant results in that endeavor. We reduced our invoices back down from 1.4 down to 1.2. P-card usage went up 16% to 204,000 transactions. And our overall bypass rate, which is what we call the rate where something comes through the door and goes straight into the processing, went up to 60%. So that was, we were quite happy with where things went in 2007. And then, like everybody else, we were gone green in 2008. In 2008, the goals were, again, get as many people sending us electronic invoices and images, consolidate our utility invoices still, increase ACH usage, excuse me, and make expense reports submissions paperless. Another interesting thing we did was along the lines of capturing kilowatt-hour usage off our electric bills. And ReadSoft was able to do that by allowing us to pick that up as an additional keyword of what we were processing before. And our facilities groups used that to measure the consumption use through some of the buildings throughout our footprint. So that was kind of an interesting wrinkle. So the results of 2008 were we increased our e-invoicing quite significantly, as you can see from 2007. It went up where it is today, what that delta is. Reducing invoices, we're now probably going to get out of this year probably with just about shy of 1 million invoices. Our P-card activity we've picked up nicely. ACH payments, we continue try to improve that and get as many people off of wanting checks. And the other thing that we were 100% successful in doing was in 2007, all of our expense reports were coming through on paper, where now they're totally electronic, and that has saved us a lot of processing issues. So what's ahead for tomorrow for Time Warner Cable? We've got some interesting things going on in all the different aspects. We have, with ReadSoft, we're doing a couple initiatives with them early next year. We're going to install their collector module, which will help us with electronic invoicing. What that will allow us to do is, A, receive multiple formats of files and images to put into the system, and then it'll actually integrate, index, and move those invoices over into PeopleSoft. And we also are looking at some vendors we're talking to where they will actually send us an XML file, which basically is almost like a flat file, and ReadSoft will actually turn that into an image for us so that we have something to send out for our approvers to approve, but it actually is almost 100% straight pass-through because the fields, there is no inconsistencies about the image or somebody putting something on the image or circling a number or whatever. It's strictly a flat file that'll always be that same way and get read 100% of the time. So that's exciting, and we're very much looking to move that forward. Now, for the non-ReadSoft initiative side, we do have an on-base upgrade that we're going through right now. We're looking very much to mobility workflow for T&Es, invoices, anything that purchase or anything that currently people are signing into the system to approve. We would like to have them go to to be able to do on their phone. And then lastly, we're looking in collaboration with our strategic procurement group to create a vendor portal to do some potentially fancy things there with either have similar things that are done today with vendors looking into seeing their own activity to doing PO flip and possibly some other interactive processes that will, again, reduce our number of people and increase our process. So we've currently had a very, one of the things that our people like working with our products. They find it very user-friendly, and we've had several of our staff has been with us for the whole 10 years that I've been here within the department. So it's, I think the products are great. Technology is the greatest way to go. ReadSoft's a great company to work with, as well as our other partners. But if you're not there yet, you certainly need to make the leap, and it's well worth your benefit. And at this time, I'd like to turn it back over to Steve.
All right. Thank you very much, Larry. That's very impressive. As I look at these great insights that you shared with us at Time Warner Cable, I am thinking of this study by Paystream Advisors about which really shows that the benefits of automation are really very tangible and they're very achievable. If you look at these benefits from this survey, it's really right in line with what you're saying, Larry. And I think that one metric that you had, I forget what you call it, but I think of it like as a touchless environment. I think your metric was 60%. And we think that's entirely reasonable to expect. We have many of our customers that when they receive paper invoices and they put it into a scanner, with some very minimal verification, it's very reasonable to expect that you'll see a very touchless environment, that it will take those invoices, put them in through the mainstream of processing, and auto-post on a first pass yield. So I'm thinking of Kellogg's that are up around 50%, totally touchless, rich products, closer to like 75%. So those are huge benefits. And as I listen to what you were able to accomplish in the first year, if I heard that correctly, you had increased your invoice volume by 400,000, and at the same time, you reduced headcount by 30 to 40 people. That's a pretty impressive story. So now that we've taken a little more of an in-depth look at what Larry's group were able to do at Time Warner Cable, I'd like to just recommend a few key concepts that you can keep in mind as you are thinking about automation. And I think there's about 28% of you that said that you are in that initial evaluation stage. We do have a similar number that they're in a more mature shared services environment, and then the balance of you sort of in between that. So I would just like to say that you know, like Time Warner Cable, you really need to assess where you are today. Document your current AP status and what you would like to change about it. Then secondly, set a benchmark for your goals. It's real easy through organizations like Shared Services, Link, Bay Stream Advisors, the Accounts Payable Network, and others to really understand what those benchmarks are for companies that are doing very well. So in other words, you really need to know what you want the system to look like when you're complete, and then how do you go about judging whether you've been successful or not. I think another very strong point to make is to really communicate with end users and other departments, especially on the processing pain points, to gather their input so that they become a part of the evaluation, and trust your staff. Request input from them and give them support to make the changes. And I think you'll find that that buy-in will come back to you in better rates of adoption within your organization, and they will have smoother user acceptance when you have had that clear communication with them. These are, automation can really produce some dramatic cost savings and efficiencies, but clearly it doesn't happen overnight. It takes work to make it happen, but I think also your business partner is very important for you, so it's very important that since the whole implementation process in any software solution is kind of a dynamic thing and you learn as you go, it's important that your partners be flexible, that they bring best practices to the table, that they're able to adapt to changes as you gain in your learnings as you begin to implement and go through that process. So having said that, I advise you to really work to contain the scope of the project at each phase of your milestones that you have. So let me just talk for a moment about what you might look for in an automation partner. We like to look at it from these three standpoints. It's really, I don't think I have ever met an automation partner who hasn't said that they were the best and the leader in the marketplace. It's always on every first slide of every overview presentation. I'd like to be more specific about that and talk about these three criteria. So market share, solution legitimacy, and security to you as an organization in working with that particular partner. So let's look at the first one, which is market share. So there's several ways to look at this, and let me just relate this in terms of ReadSoft. So ReadSoft has kind of a jump on market share because we have been the first to market on a number of important technologies. They're in the automation area. For example, let me just give you one specific example, and that is the ability to read a an unstructured document like an invoice, or you might say it's semi-structured because it does have fields of information, but it's somewhat unstructured because those fields could be anywhere on the document when it comes in. So the actual ability to read that invoice without having set up templates in advance, in other words, for the software to just be smart enough to read the invoice and collect all that information and put it in the right places. That was a technology that ReadSoft came to market first with, a number of others as well. So we also think that it's important to look at a vendor's experience in their customer base. Who have they done business with? Are these companies of significant size and complexity? Do they relate in ways in the industry that they're in to your organization? ReadSoft customers range from very small, as few as 12,000 invoices a year, all the way up to very large, where they have multiple shared services all over the world. And Intel is one I'm thinking of that has 8 shared services facilities around the world. And that some of our customers process as many as 8 million. So that means the software itself has to be able to be utilized by companies that are small, but also be scalable up to very large organizations. So one of the resources that we will provide to you at the conclusion of this presentation is a link to our online reference library. And we'd encourage you to go to this website and browse through the video stories and the success gallery to kind of hear firsthand from some of our customers on their automation projects with ReadSoft. So next we measure the market leadership in terms of how legitimate the solutions are. What does that mean, legitimately? Well, basically it means how do the large ERP companies in the world view this solution in ReadSoft. And the principal way that they validate that is through a certification process. So companies like SAP, companies like Oracle, Microsoft have these validation or certification processes. ReadSoft has submitted to and qualified to be certified partners with these major organizations. So that really guarantees to you that as you are implementing a solution, you'll have a solution that does not do anything but enhance the support mechanism that you have with your ERP company. And it also ensures that there will be no conflicts between this add-on software and the software of your ERP solution. So it's a real value to you to see that these solutions are really deemed legitimate by these larger ERP organizations. So you'll be able to see, if you go to SAP's EcoHub site, you'll be able to see and gather more information on ReadSoft as a SAP partner, for example. And you'll see that Oracle, that our solution supports both the 11i and the R12 e-business suite solutions as well. So that's what we mean by solution legitimacy. So the third thing, lastly, that we want you to feel secure. So we're talking about really security, that third bullet item. So we want you to really feel secure about your decision. So as you can see, our solutions have had a very long history, over 20 years in the marketplace. We're a publicly traded company with a history of ongoing growth and profitability. Our solutions can be trusted because they have a global footprint, and it's tried and tested under thousands of customers. So we have 10,000 customers that are utilizing our solution. About 7,000 of those are very specific to accounts payable. So we like to say that we're large enough as a company that you can be assured that we will be there. We're a safe investment. But we are also small enough that we can be very nimble and responsive to your very specific needs. And I think that's a big value for us. So, and for you. So let's figure out what our takeaways have been from, or what we hope that our takeaways have been. So our hope today was that we can share with you some very better understanding of what the industry sees as challenges and obstacles in reaching objectives within shared services and accounts payable, to understand what those goals and objectives are, and to share with you a real-life story from Time Warner Cable as to some of those reasonable expectations that you can see. So you can see here, increased invoice volume by 40% without adding staff. Very reasonable objective. Saved nearly 40 million keystrokes a year. I'm not sure what that would be in a percentage-wise, Larry, but I'm sure that it was very significant for you. Also related to you, where a lot of these invoices now can be deemed touchless. We want to get to as much of an electronic environment as possible to really speed up the process of being able to pay quickly. So we want to not pay too quickly and use our cash inefficiently, but we want to be able to we want to have our timing of payment be one that we control and is not really being controlled by the fact that the system is too clunky for us to be able to pay our invoices on time. So we see, I was very interested to see your survey results. We see invoices taking as much as 6 weeks to be paid. Our customers typically are well under 10 days to be able to bring those invoices ready for payment. So that enables easily that 95% payment on time possibility. So I thank everyone here. I hope that you will take a look at ReadSoft in terms of partnership. We appreciate you participating in today's webinar. If you're interested in learning more about best practices for your AP shared services model, you can get a special report from the Accounts Payable Network. If you would be kind enough to just email me a request for the report, you can see my email address there, steve.benyon@readsoft.com, and I will see that you get that free report sent to you. And we'd be happy to talk to you about any initiatives that you might have in place and how we might be able to help you in your evaluation. So I'd like to turn the time back to Susie to field any questions that we might have in our remaining about 10 minutes. Susie?
That's great. Thank you very much, Larry and Steve. So we've got an abundance of questions, so I'm going to see if we can get through the majority of them. They're at varying levels regarding implementation. Some of them are about systems implementation and a little bit technical. So let's just see how we crack on. So my first question I'm going to put to, this is probably for Larry. With touchless invoices, how do you determine that the invoices are valid to pay? Who approves them? And say for a catered meal from a small vendor, what's the kind of the process there?
If
for Larry.
If they're not PO related, we have after we voucher it here in shared services, it will go back out to someone in the operations group to approve that invoice to be paid, and then once it's Sometimes, depending on dollar value, it may be a couple people that need to approve it. But once it's approved, it then flips the flags on in PeopleSoft, which says it's approved and ready to pay, and it'll pay at the next whatever that scheduled pay date is. If it's PO related, I'm sorry. If it's PO related, it automatically goes to PO match.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Let me just add to that, Susie, that that of the components within an automated environment, one is to get from paper to electronic, and then to receive those and do the verification that it is in fact all of the OCR collecting, capture of data is accurate. And then when it goes to the ERP, have it either manually or automatically trigger workflows that, based on the business rule that you have set, get those appropriate documents and images into the hands of the right people who can do that approval in the case of non-PO and resolve any discrepancies that might occur in the three-way match process. So that's all part of this particular solution we're talking about.
Steve, question for you. Does ReadSoft integrate with the on-base image storage solution? And if so, from a high level, can you just give us a brief overview of how that is?
Okay, absolutely. Yes, in fact, it does, and it depends a little bit on what your ERP system is, but let me just use SAP as an example. Any archive link certified repository is interfaced nicely with this particular solution. When we do OCR, for example, on the front end, we temporarily store that in our local archive, and then when we transfer that data over to the ERP system, the image itself transfers to whatever that certified archive happens to be. So it could be on-base, it could be any one of 130 plus archives. We pass the data into the ERP system, and then we provide a link within that ERP system that throughout the workflow, you can then pull up that image, and it will be associated with that particular workflow transaction as it processes through.
Okay, thank you. I'll throw this one back to Larry, if I may. Regarding the productivity model, the question is, can this be applied to any size organization, in your opinion? Or do you think you've benefited from the scale of your operation?
Well, I think any size organization will benefit. Naturally, that degree of benefit would probably change somewhat due to your scale or your magnitude of what you're taking on. But I think just in the aspect of from the processing side itself, people will enjoy the experience much better than what they're currently doing today. If they're doing it with paper or some other means, it's much easier to work with, and there's just a lot of other types of maybe not non-hard dollar savings associated with the process, but there's other factors that make it well worthwhile for any size organization.
Okay, good. And there's another query that's come through, which I will put to Steve, if I may, because it's kind of in the same area. Can you just, this individual has a very small team, so there might not be scope as such for headcount reduction and kind of obvious quantifiable cost reduction. If she's wanting to sell this idea to her boss, what's your experience of the other kind of benefits that can be realized around a hard numbered business case?
Well, return on investment usually comes from 2 or 3 areas, and we all know that there are soft costs and there are hard costs. For example, if we're eliminating part of the work of approvers out in the field, and there's 100, 200 approvers in the field, and we save each of them 10% of their time, that's a soft cost. It is more difficult to to actually quantify that. But in the hard cost area, we typically see the throughput of any invoice processor going up as many as anywhere from doubling to quadrupling their throughput. So that translates really into either headcount reduction or redeployment to other areas, or frees them up to be able to do more than just process invoices. Or it means that with the same number of people, you can actually scale your business up and accommodate growth. So the first one is in headcount reduction. The second area really relates to the cycle time of processing invoices. So if we process invoices faster, we're able to get some very hard savings, like we have the ability to capture a higher number of discounts. And sometimes people say, well, we don't, we only have so many of our vendors offer us this discounts. Well, a lot of times that's because we've never really had an opportunity to really effectively deliver on time enough to capture the discounts, so we really haven't gone after them. So discount capture is a big one. Avoiding late penalties is a big one. And then there are some sort of semi-hard cost savings, a little bit more difficult to quantify, but they're very real and tangible. And that is if your DMB rating goes up because you're paying on time, that has a very tangible impact on the cost of money to your organization. If you're reaching service level agreements and can be counted on and depended on, and your reputation grows in the industry, that enables procurement to be able to negotiate much better deals with individuals that you're dealing with. So we've really seen some very tangible benefits that come in just relating to things like being able to negotiate better contracts with vendors.
Okay, back to you, please, Larry. With the T&E part of your organization, are you allowing the receipts to be scanned or using a company card for expenses? What's your approach there?
We actually kind of have a mixed bag. We do have a American Express card, and we use the My Wallet feature with that for putting those expenses onto an expense report. But we do allow all the receipts that do come in through image, and then we move them right into our processing. So we're no longer receiving any paper here at Charlotte.
Okay, question back to you, please, Steve. How do you get the accounting entries posted into SAP, Oracle, or ERPs from ReadSoft?
Okay, very, very good question. That's a part of the integration. Our workflow and our invoice management solutions reside inside of the ERP, and the OCR resides outside of the ERP. So there is an interface that enables the passing of that data into the ERP system, and it basically auto-populates that area inside of the ERP. So there isn't any hands-on that has to be done in order to have that show up as a part of that particular transaction. In short, it's an interface that's automated.
I've got time for 2 more questions. Question on duplicate invoices to you, please, Steve. How does the system read a duplicate invoice, and on what criteria is that based?
I'm sorry, is the question how does it handle duplicate invoices?
It's correct.
Okay, great. Well, we know that some ERP systems actually have some duplicate checks in those. We enhance any of those dupe checks in a couple of ways. Number one, we expand the criteria that you can use in order to find that duplicate check, that duplicate. So we have, for example, 11 criteria that is all configurable just by checkboxes. I want this one, this one, this one, and that one to be leveraged when I'm looking for duplicate invoices. And the second area that we really enhance those processes is we move that dupe check way up front in the process. Some of these ERP systems, they don't really catch the duplicate until way downstream after all of the work has been done in getting the invoice into the system and going through various, perfecting of the invoice. Then it goes through a duplicate check closer to the end, which makes no sense. So we move that way